everyone, Anna here, and it is lilac season here in Denver. I could not be more excited. Spring is just my favorite, and lilacs are a childhood memory of mine. We had these humongous bushes in our yard when I was growing up, and the entire property just filled with their amazing scent. So as you can imagine, I'm very excited to be doing this demonstration for you today, and we'll be focusing on one single bloom of the lilacs and kind of the anatomy of it and how I would approach painting this what looks to be a very tricky subject, but I'll show you how we can simplify it, narrow it down, make it really fun to paint. So along the way, I'm also going to share my top 5 tips for painting lilacs and how you can implement that for studio paintings and larger floral paintings that you'd like to do and maybe spend a little bit more time on. I'm painting these from life, but I've included a reference photo of my subjects so that you can follow along. And of course, that's included as always in the description below. So go ahead and grab your paints and brushes and let's get started. The colors on my palette today are transparent oxide red and brown from Rembrandt, amethyst from Michael Harding, ruby red from Vasari, cadmium yellow light from Sennelier. This is rosebud from Vasari, warm white from Utrecht, warm gray also from Utrecht, and then I've got video blue from Vasari, viridian from Rembrandt, ultramarine blue from Michael Harding, and ivory black from Sennelier. For my brushes, I have a size 2 Princeton Aspen 6500 FB filbert, and then another Princeton Aspen, but this one is a flat, also a size 2. I'll be doing much of my block-in with this Robert Simmons Signet size 6 filbert, and then fine detail work I can do with this Rosemary and Co Pure Sable Series 99, size 4 round. All right, starting the timer now. I think it's a little ambitious to try to do a 5x7 lilac painting in just 20 minutes. I started with a smaller panel than what I'm usually doing for these 20-minute studies, but even so, I'm kind of feeling the pressure right now because lilacs are tricky. They're a very complex form, and so it's going to be our job as the artist to simplify them down to their most basic shapes and gesture. I might give myself just a little bit more than the 20 minutes just because I'm toning my panel right now, and this is really something you can do before you start your timer. But for the sake of demonstration here, I wanted you to be able to see what I'm doing. I'm using a combination of viridian, amethyst, and transparent oxide brown, and I've thinned it with Gamsol. And I'm using my biggest brush for this. So let's just dive in. Let's start with some rosebud and some warm white, and we'll mix the amethyst into that. And we're gonna mix up, and let's add some warm gray here too. We don't want it to be too purple. We want it to be a muted purple, so that when we start building up more of our intense color, we have somewhere to go. And this is still going to look quite purple. So this is going to be our main foundation color. We'll use this to block in the main shape of these lilacs here. And I'm squinting down so that I'll also be able to see some of those areas where there's holes in the shape, more or less. Areas where we can see the little stem showing through, or maybe where some of the lilacs have not bloomed all the way. And so right there, you already get a sense of the shape and the gesture of these flowers. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab some viridian and some of this yellow, because I don't want to neglect the leaves. Typically for me, the leaves are actually the hardest part of the painting. I find that designing leaves can be really tricky. And so the subject I've selected today is actually a little bit more straightforward than some of the other ones I've tackled in the past. So I'm just going to paint what I'm seeing. I don't really have time to spend designing these leaves right now. I can save that for another time. Honestly, the purpose of this study for me today is to really just get warmed up, in the hopes that when I start a larger painting of these lilacs later today, I'll be energized and ready to go. I'll have a feel for them. I'll have an idea of the way that I want to paint them. And so this is really a great way to do that. It's non-committal. I'm not tied down or locked into a major composition yet. And I can just play and study the shapes and the gestures and the colors and all of the good things that make up these beautiful flowers without feeling so much pressure. Of course, 20 minutes is still some pressure, I suppose, but it's a lot less pressure than trying to do a finished painting. All right, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush now, and I'm going to go ahead and start getting into some of the darkest darks that I'm seeing right in here, maybe even darker. And I'm really looking to see the shape of that stem as it peeks through in different places. And I'm following the curve. So I want to make sure that that curve is in alignment with itself, even if I'm breaking up that shape. So I'm being very careful to look over that whole shape before I commit to making a mark like that. There's another one back there. There's really two heads of these blooms here, and one in front of the other, and so I want to indicate that, because that is characteristic of lilacs, isn't it? They often bloom in these little pairs like this. Taking some transparent oxide red, maybe some brown, mixing it with the amethyst, I can get a really nice dark purple, an earthy dark purple, and I can start going in and blocking in some of these darks surrounding the stem. And then I'm leaving that foundation that I made of purple in certain places, and hopefully leaving it in the shape of some of those individual little floral or flowers. Now this is where it can be very easy to get lost in all the details way too early on. So I'm squinting down as I'm looking at them to make sure that I don't get sucked into that temptation. We all do it. We all want to delight in those little details, but I tell you what, when you're under the gun, you've only got 20 minutes. This is no time to be detailed. The goal is to hopefully have a painting that suggests detail without actually having to do all the work to make the individual flowers or make it look super detailed. So I want to suggest it. And I'm doing that by simplifying my shapes and honing in on just a few values and colors and working all over the painting as I go. If you've found that lilacs or hydrangeas or any kind of flower with these multiple little blooms on them are intimidating for you, then try a study like this where you're only doing a section of it, a small portion, a vignette, and or a little portrait, I like to think of it as. And that can really take away some of the scary. I'm going to go ahead and clean my big brush and load up with some more purple. We'll use the Rosebud as our base, because I'm really finding that I want to add more paint volume to this already. I'm just feeling like I was being a little conservative with my paint application, so let's go ahead and get more bold with it. Even more. Touch on some of the warm gray there. Squinting down. Now, one of the ways that you can make something look lighter is by simply adding more paint volume, and that automatically gives it a sense of coming forward in space, which makes it appear lighter, even if it's the same value as whatever it is that you've been painting over the top of. Paint volume gives you that sense of luminosity. It's exciting and fun to do this, so I definitely challenge you to try. If you're one of those painters that feels like you never use enough paint and you're kind of skimpy with it and stingy with it, then this is my challenge for you today. It's also a great way to create the impression of those flowers being active and busy and many, you know. So give it a try. And then if you feel like you're getting a little bit too messy, go back to your smaller brush and refine some of your shapes, which is what I'm going to do next. So by nature, they have these little bulbous shapes at the tip that are the last ones to bloom. And those are typically lighter in value than the flowers further down the stem. And then I'm just going to hint at a few of these little 4-leaf flowers. I don't know what you call them. They bloom in 4s, right? And that's characteristic of the lilacs. So I don't want to paint them all, but I want to paint a couple of them just to show that this is what this is. Doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm trying to hint at the nature of this particular kind of flower. A couple more of those little bulbs or buds. Real quick, if you are enjoying this video about lilac painting, you might enjoy my learning site, Learn from Anna Rose Bain. It's a great platform where you can stream every single video I've ever made, including my course on painting peonies. There's a whole lot of knowledge and information on there, and I take my time walking you through my colors, my process, all of it. So be sure to check it out, and in the meantime, let's get back to this video. And already it's starting to look very lilac-like. But what is it missing? What does it need? I think it needs some more darks. So we'll go ahead and get back into those earth tones there. We can start to chisel out, surrounding some of these shapes that we've already created with our lights. They're darker towards the stem, so create some of these darks right up to the stem. If it gets too busy, go back in with your big brush, knock some of that detail down. Or if you don't like some of the shapes that are going on in there, either add more shapes to create some balance there. Like this shape right here doesn't really match anything else right now. So I can either go in and add more of those darks to balance that out, or I can make that shape a little bit smaller. But I think I'm going to go in with more darks because that is what it's telling me it needs right now. Oh boy, I'm feeling that clock ticking. As the shapes move away from us in space, or if they turn down into shadow, we can really simplify them even more. So towards the bottom of the flowers here, I'm just going to darken that and simplify so that our eye is drawn to the area of the most detail. And then back here, some of these petals are catching the light. This is where you can have some fun with it because there's all these little outliers that make for some great shapes at the edges of your major forms. And then the icing on the cake, of course, is when you can start going in from the background, and that's probably what I'll do next. Clean my big brush here. And I really like that earthy green background. I've used it before. So I'm going to grab some transparent oxide red and mix that with some of these greens that I've already got going on this other side of my palette. And then I'm going to go in, test a section. Maybe a bit more Viridian or some ultramarine blue. Okay. Yeah, oh, that's all right. I'll work with that. And then I'm going to go in and start painting up to the edges of these shapes, carefully observing to make sure that I'm not making them all the same and that I'm being as true to what I'm seeing as I can, given our time restraint. I had to pause for a second and readjust my panel up here. I'm just using masking tape to hold it up, so that'd be a shame if it came crashing down. Okay, so how do we paint this and still create contrast against the green leaves? Well, I want it to be just ever so slightly darker than the leaves, which it is, and so I feel like that can work. But some of my values are not exact quite yet, so I'm going to depend on squinting to help me get a better idea of where I need to go with this. And of course, I'm running out of time, so every brush stroke needs to count. We can't waste brush strokes. We can't afford to waste brush strokes when we're only working for 20 minutes at a time. So make sure that you're really zoned in on this and paying attention to every single mark you're making. Don't go into autopilot. That doesn't mean you have to work slowly, obviously. You can work quickly and intentionally. And you can, of course, scrub your background in like this if you want to, and that can happen very, very quickly. But the point is that there are moments where you do need to slow down and pay attention to where you're going, and really pay attention to what direction your brush stroke is going in. You know, where you start that brush stroke is going to really matter. And once in a while, it's not going to go exactly as you planned. So you'll still have to get some things back. For example, here I lost my stem, so I want to get that back. But I want to make sure it matches the rest of the painting. So I'm adding that brown in. Maybe grab some yellow, mix it with a little bit of the warm white, some video blue to cool it down. And we'll put some highlight on these stems. And this leaf comes down this way. I'm not going to get to every single leaf, that's for sure. But I want to paint the ones that feel like they have the most interesting shape and gesture. Or the ones that feel like they're interacting somehow with this lilac that I'm painting. For example, this one, which is overlapping it here. I find those kinds of overlaps to be really interesting and fun because they give you some perspective and some atmosphere in your painting. Even if you're only painting something simple like this, overlapping shapes can create that feeling of foreshortening and perspective. Make it look a little less flat, hopefully. So I've switched to my smaller brush again. I'm going to go in and look for places where the background can peek through between these shapes. Trying not to cut out too much of that beautiful purple, but you know, it's not just a solid fluffy mass. There are definitely areas where the background shows through and you can see some of these overlapping shapes. So definitely adds some interest. It's kind of like painting a mini purple tree, I suppose. There's got to be sky holes in there, right? But I want to leave some places where we have more mass of purple, so I'm giving it as much variety as I can. All right, what does it need? Only a couple minutes left, so I need to prioritize here. I need to hint at these leaves a little bit and show that there's a center line that goes through there. Lilac leaves are a distinctive triangle shape. And this one coming towards us is a great example of that. So I might want to spend a little bit more time on this one. And then I want to bring it forward by painting a dark beneath it, just to really emphasize that edge and that shape. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Reminding myself and all of you other perfectionists out there, this is a good exercise for us in humility and restraint. Last couple seconds. All right, my timer went off, but as you can see, I didn't quite make it to the edge of the canvas here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. And just finish that off. And just mixing up my brushwork here. I'll try to tie all this together here at the bottom of the painting. Let's do one more thing. Let's put some darks right at the base. Make that pop a little bit more between that lilac and the background. Oh, I like that so much better. Okay, well that's my 20-minute painting for you today. I hope you'll try this yourself. Gather some lilacs from your own yard or your neighbor's yard and give this one a try. Here's a quick summary for you of my top 5 tips for painting lilacs. Number 1, focus on the big overall shape and gesture of each flower. Paint the leaves in simple triangular heart shapes. Mass in your main color and value first, and then start adding in your darks and lights on top of that or around it. Suggest the shapes and get more specific in a few key areas while keeping it simple everywhere else. And finally, paint your background up to the lilacs for maximum edge variety and interesting brushwork.